An emergency United Nations Security Council session on nuclear treaties. The Russian president displayed classified NATO documents on screen that contradicted Britain's official position. Allied ambassadors physically distanced themselves from a UK delegation within minutes. And what happened next exposed fatal weaknesses in Western unity that could collapse the entire alliance system. If you want to understand how Britain's international standing disintegrated in a single afternoon, hit that subscribe button right now, because this diplomatic catastrophe continues unfolding as we speak. Here's what sparked this unprecedented international humiliation. 3 days ago, the Prime Minister delivered what Downing Street called a robust defense of international norms at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Starmer specifically condemned Russia's deployment of tactical nuclear weapons near the Polish border, calling a flagrant violation of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty that demanded unified Western response. The statement was unambiguous. Britain stands firmly with NATO allies in maintaining collective security against Russian nuclear intimidation and treaty violations, but the Kremlin wasn't preparing a standard diplomatic rebuttal. At precisely 14:23 Greenwich Mean Time yesterday, Putin requested an emergency UN Security Council meeting, claiming urgent evidence of Western duplicity that threatens global security. Security Council veterans described this as the most aggressive Russian diplomatic maneuver since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Putin's presentation began at 9:47 a.m. New York time with chilling precision. Addressing the council directly in fluent English rather than using his translator, Putin stated, "The British Prime Minister has deliberately misrepresented the facts regarding nuclear treaties while his own government secretly negotiates separate security arrangements that undermine the very alliance he claims to strengthen." Then came the devastating revelation. Putin displayed what appeared to be authentic British diplomatic cables dated just 18 days earlier. The document showed British diplomats discussing a differentiated response framework that would allow certain NATO members, including Britain, to pursue bilateral security accommodations if alliance consensus proved unattainable or strategically limiting. The Security Council chamber fell silent. UN Ambassador Barbara Woodward's face drained to color as cameras captured her desperately messaging London. American Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield visibly shifted her chair away from the British delegation in what body language experts later described as instinctive diplomatic distancing. Within 30 minutes, 5 NATO ambassadors requested clarification from London before continuing the session. French President Emmanuel Macron, attending a press conference in Canada, abruptly declined to answer questions about British diplomatic credibility. German Chancellor Scholz can let a scheduled call with Starmer, citing scheduling conflicts that materialize within minutes of Putin's speech. Prime Minister Starmer, awakened at 3:15 a.m. with the news, immediately convened an emergency Cobra meeting. Security footage from Downing Street captured Starmer arriving ashen-faced, still wearing his watch on the wrong wrist. "This is catastrophic," he reportedly told aides. "Putin has outmaneuvered us completely." Inside that crisis meeting, according to 2 senior sources, Foreign Secretary David Lammy appeared physically ill when shown the full Security Council footage. "These look like authentic documents," he reportedly whispered, "but they've been completely mischaracterized. This is classic Russian disinformation using selective truths." Defense Secretary John Healey allegedly shouted, "How did they get these papers? This is a massive security breach." Intelligence officials present had no immediate explanation for how highly classified communications had reached the Kremlin. Meanwhile, British military veterans who served in NATO operations during the Cold War watch in dismay as their sacrifices seem increasingly meaningless. Colonel James Harrington Rhett, a 72-year-old former Royal Artillery officer who served in West Germany facing Soviet forces, spoke with visible emotion. "We stood guard for decades, prepared to die defending Europe from Russian aggression. Now, Putin mocks us openly, while our leaders look like school children caught cheating on an exam." Margaret Blackwood, 68, whose husband served 3 NATO deployments before dying of service-related illness, expressed similar outrage. "Michael believed in NATO with his whole heart. He'd be devastated to see Britain humiliated like this on the world stage," she said, clutching her husband's service medals. While these veterans watched their legacy crumble, Russian oligarchs continue enjoying luxury lifestyles in London despite supposed sanctions. We're talking 62 million mansions in Belgravia registered to shell companies. Super yachts with Russian beneficial owners still docking at British overseas territories through legal loopholes. Private schools and universities accepting Russian wealth through offshore structures that technically comply with sanctions while violating their spirit. The contrast is so flagrant, so morally indefensible that even senior military figures are questioning Britain's strategic coherence. Former NATO commander Sir Richard Sheriff called it diplomatic schizophrenia on yesterday's Newsnight. We cannot simultaneously rely on NATO's collective defense while secretly pursuing separate arrangements. Putin has exposed dangerous contradictions in our approach. But then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. King Charles III made a carefully calibrated diplomatic intervention that shattered royal protocol in ways not witnessed since World War II. During a previously scheduled reception for Commonwealth military attachés at St. James Palace, the king delivered remarks that sent diplomatic shockwaves through both Whitehall and foreign capitals. Britain's commitment to collective security and international treaties must be absolute and unwavering, the king declared with unmistakable gravity. When we allow ambiguity or expediency to compromise core alliances, we risk repeating the tragic lessons of history that my parents' generation learned at tremendous cost. Palace sources confirmed these pointed comments were added personally by the king against the advice of government officials who had reviewed his prepared remarks. The intervention was clearly intended as a direct rebuke to the government's handling of alliance politics and Russian relations. Royal insiders revealed Charles had become deeply troubled by Britain's inconsistent approach to international treaties and alliance commitments. One source claims the king told his closest advisers, Britain's word must be its bond in international affairs. Without credibility, we have nothing. The optics are devastating for Starr's government, creating perception that even the monarch believes Britain is failing to uphold its most basic security commitments during a critical confrontation with Russia. Global markets reacted immediately as NATO unity appeared to fracture. The pound sterling plummeted against the dollar, reaching its lowest level since the 2022 trust mini-budget crisis. Defense industry stocks surged across Russian and Chinese exchanges, with analysts citing increasing Western strategic incoherence as the primary driver. Political divisions emerged instantly at Westminster. 27 Conservative MPs submitted formal letters questioning Britain's NATO strategy. Shadow Defense Secretary James Cartage demanded an emergency parliamentary debate on Britain's collapsing international credibility. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson broke his recent political silence with a single devastating tweet. Putin laughing at Britain. Allies abandoning us. National humiliation under Labour. International reactions were swift and severe. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte issued a carefully worded statement calling for complete transparency and unity among allies during challenging security environments. The White House announced a strategic alliance review focusing on communication protocols with key European partners. Social media exploded with geopolitical anxiety. Hashtags like #NATO crisis and #Putin outsmarts UK trended globally for 19 consecutive hours. Video clips of Putin's Security Council presentation were viewed 47 million times in a single day, with Russian state media channels amplifying the footage across all platforms. Defense analysts described the situation as NATO's most dangerous internal crisis since France withdrew from the Integrated Military Command in 1966. Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO Nicholas Burns called a masterclass in Russian political warfare, exploiting Western inconsistencies. Inside number 10, absolute chaos reigns. Ministers are reportedly refusing to appear on interview programs, leaving government communication in disarray. National Security Advisor Stephen Lovegrove allegedly threatened resignation after a heated exchange with the Prime Minister's communications team, which he accused of fundamental incompetence in managing classified information. Foreign Office Minister Catherine West was overheard telling a colleague, "This government is imploding." Putin has achieved with one speech what his disinformation operations failed to accomplish in years. WhatsApp groups with names like damage control and credibility crises are frantically exchanging damage limitation strategies. Civil servants describe the atmosphere as panicked improvisation, without strategic direction. The Prime Minister appeared completely overwhelmed. According to Downing Street insiders, one senior official reported that Starmer has begun asking whether NATO will survive this crisis, reflecting the gravity of Britain's diplomatic catastrophe. But here's the classified intelligence assessment that reveals Britain's true vulnerability. Leaked Ministry of Defense documents show that senior military planners now believe Putin orchestrated this diplomatic offensive to precede actual military movements in Eastern Europe. The assessment indicates Russian forces are preparing for significant exercises near the Suwalki Gap, the critical corridor connecting Poland to the Baltic states, while NATO cohesion is compromised. If these documents are accurate and if they reflect what military sources claim, then Putin may have manufactured this diplomatic crisis specifically to paralyze NATO decision-making before executing more aggressive territorial maneuvers. Think about what that means. Britain diplomatically isolated when unified alliance response is most critical. NATO headquarters questioning London's reliability, precisely when collective defense commitments may be tested. American strategic attention diverted to alliance management rather than deterrence. The optics of that would be absolutely devastating, potentially marking the beginning of NATO's functional collapse as a credible defensive alliance. Meanwhile, opposition leader Rishi Sunak is masterfully positioning himself as the statesman Britain needs. While Starmer fumbles through contradictory explanations, Sunak projects calm authority and diplomatic experience. In times of international crisis, Britain requires leadership that commands respect from both allies and adversaries, Sunak declared from conservative headquarters. His emphasis on consistent values and alliance credibility resonates powerfully amid diplomatic chaos. The polls tell the story. Conservative support has surged from 34% to a dominant 43% in just 36 hours. For the first time since Starr entered Downing Street, the Tories aren't just gaining ground, they're approaching landslide territory. More surprisingly, polling shows unprecedented public anxiety about Britain's international standing. When asked if Britain remains a serious global power, only 28% of respondents answered affirmatively, the lowest figure since polling on this question began in 1956. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical. Putin has scheduled a major address to the Russian Federal Assembly tomorrow. NATO ambassadors will meet an emergency session without Britain present, an unprecedented exclusion of a founding member. Military analysts are closely monitoring Russian naval movements near the Baltic states. The question is no longer whether Britain can repair its diplomatic standing quickly. It's whether the Western alliance system itself can withstand such public fracturing at its core. Britain is watching its international influence collapse while facing its most significant security challenge since the Cold War. This crisis will be studied for decades as a moment when post-Brexit Britain discovered the harsh limitations of its diminished global position. At its epicenter stands Karma, who looks increasingly outmatched, exhausted, and unequal to the ruthless geopolitical chess game being played by Vladimir Putin. So here's the question that matters. Is this the beginning of NATO's unraveling? Did the Prime Minister just blunder into a Russian trap that could end not just his career, but the Western security architecture that preserved peace for 75 years? Or has Putin overplayed his hand, potentially reuniting NATO against obvious Russian manipulation? What do you think? Will NATO survive this crisis stronger or fundamentally weakened? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this international disaster shocked you as much as it shocked us, share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's really happening in the corridors of power right now. The mainstream media won't tell you the full truth about Britain's collapsing international position, but we will. And tomorrow, we'll bring you exclusive analysis from former NATO commanders about whether the alliance can survive this unprecedented crisis of confidence in its founding member.